Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Prior to Gary Cooper's appearance on the High Noon's dusty set, and long before Crooked Eye by Jack Elam became a hallmark of Hollywood, both guys were slogging through two very distinct, extremely harsh iterations of the American dream. One originated from cattle as well as class. From cotton fields, the other destroyed dwellings, as well as an eye injury that almost ruined his prospects before he even possessed one. However, via battle funds, poor agreements, accidents, and a world without waiting for a second chances, both of them found themselves on the same set. And when they did, there were no sparks, simply fly. They detonated. Let's go back to the early 1920s. Gary Cooper is in Montana, who recently dropped out of art school, recovering from an automobile accident that provided him with the rigid gait he'd carry throughout his lifetime. His father, a justice of the state Supreme Court, desires framework. His mother desires England. However, Gary wants quick cash, not hustling money, and inheritance money. Thus, he travels to Los Angeles with his parents and begins working as a stuntman. $5, $10 if you fall hard, if you ride. No script, no safety nets, and no agent. However, Cooper isn't your average cowboy extra. He's calm, tall, and ideal for the camera. Hollywood sees $1 after just one glance. Indications. He's making $50 a week by 1926, after a year, $175. By 1930, more than $1,150 per movie, with 1,000 viewers' letters every week. He opens that rigid gate, turns into a trademark, and keeps a low profile while ascending through romantic comedies and war dramas leads, as well as full-scale box office supremacy. By the decade's conclusion, he is in charge, $150,000 for each movie, and wins the title gem of any American performer during that era. He becomes the most paid celebrity in the nation in 1939, with $482,890 in a year, as Cooper is traveling to Europe in first class with countesses, studying high-quality wines, and on safaris in Africa, shooting lions, Jackie and Globe, Arizona. Lamb is a young child who picks nickels for cotton. His mother passes away when he is 4 years old. His father remarries a school teacher, instructor, who accepts a job with a loan business, but it doesn't exactly get steady. Jack's left eye gets lost in a Boy Scouts battle. Yes, a pencil poked via the socket. Additionally, when he's a teenager, the gaze begins to wander. He would be ridiculed for that wandering glance, neglected and marginalized for many years. Jack is more resilient than that, though. He grinds. His journey through Phoenix High School and attends business night sessions, while balancing employment as a trailer bank bookkeeper, salesperson, and even the ritzy Hotel Bears hotel manager. Although he is blind in one eye, nobody else is describing him as feeble. When World War II was going on, he joins the Navy, where he serves for 2 whole years, in spite of the injury. When after leaving, he applies his business degree to make a name for themselves in Hollywood, not as an accountant, but as an actor. Additionally, not any accountant will do. In 1947, Jack Elam, among the most reliable independent auditors in the motion picture business, combing looking up names like Samuel in Books Goldwyn. It ought to have been his narrative. Behind the scenes, secure and stable. However, there is an issue. His only excellent eye begins to fail. Additionally, too many hours, too much tension, too many ledgers. The doctor offers him 2 choices: get out of the business right away or shut it down entirely blind. So Jack does something crazy. He gambles. He dives without using the numbers, straight into the acting game. By 1949, he's on a pier in exploitation movies with a modest budget, playing thugs and junkies. Additionally, casting, they love the eye agents. Zanuck himself. Don't fix it, she warns him. It is a component of your enigma. Returning to Cooper's universe, things are changing. He is no longer merely a movie star. He is a living representation. He is unable to enlist when the war starts. However, he entertains by touring the Pacific. Soldiers. In 1942, He receives his first Oscar in the role of Sergeant Alvin York. He strikes Lou Gehrig's performance in Pride of the Yankees. Each action he takes is bravo. Every performance is exceptional. After the war, however, something changes. Cooper begins to grow weary. His screenplays get more bizarre. His performance deteriorates. He is attempting to reinvent himself in his late 40s, himself in melancholic parts. The Fountain, the movies, Head, Cloak, and Dagger are light on heart, but huge on ambition. He receives enormous pay. By 1948, each photo was worth $295,000. However, there is flashing fire. Jack Elam, on this, simply heating up on the other hand. Although Cooper is considering the more profound significance of the Ayn Rand's architecture adaptation, Jack's struggling through gangland movies, westerns, and videos of pulpy bees. He is caught stealing by 1950 scenes in Kansas City that are private and rawhide. He doesn't pretend to be heroic. Hegrins and plays guys who shoot first, second. And in a community that thrives on weakness alive, Jack at last discovers a niche nobody can impact someone else. Additionally, that's where their worlds meet. One man at the top, two men attempting to preserve the remaining light of fame, the other one that appeared out of nowhere with a damaged eye and a history of stealing scenes. Both of them land in 1952 roles in High Noon. The first is the legend, the wild card is the others. However, what everything is altered by what occurs on that set. High Noon was a political powder keg, fear and ego. Also, every individual on that set was aware. Gary Cooper replaced the Marshal Will Caney, the film's protagonist, at 50 years old. He was tending to a wound, recovering from back surgery, having an ulcer, and always worn out. However, the burden of the movie weighed heavily on his shoulders. This was no ordinary payday. This was his return. His opportunity to demonstrate that Hestel possessed it. In the background, Cooper was already feeling the strain. The home the Un-American Activities Committee was breathing down the neck of Hollywood, and the Carl Foreman, a film screenwriter, had recently accused of being uncooperative observer. Cooper, who had earlier provided testimony to the committee, but hesitated to give names. But now he was in the middle of a political uproar. His John Wayne, a lifelong buddy, turned his returning to the idea and calling it not American. Directors withdrew. Other Coopers stayed while the actors fled. That's as Jack Elam entered the set. He wasn't the main attraction. Not only was he not in the script that lengthy, Charlie, his role, the town intoxicated. Only a few sentences, hardly a flicker on the screen. However, something regarding Jack made people uneasy. It wasn't only the eye, however. That roving gaze made casting directors shiver. It washes vibe. He had this dangerous, unpolished energy that Hollywood didn't use as standard guidelines. Gary Cooper disliked that. Cooper was born into a family that performed heroes in a straight, honorable and tidy manner, trustworthy. None of that was done by Elam. He was erratic, arrogant, and didn't desire to be loved. Additionally, when even in a minor role, the cameras rolled, Elam diverted attention. He didn't intend to surpass Cooper, but the outcome was actual. Elam's disorderly demeanor, even in quiet, preoccupied with the ideal. Cooper put a lot of effort into protecting this image. It was evident in Cooper's eyes throughout downtime. He stayed away from Jack. He muttered to the crew. According to some, he even attempted to Elam's scenes have been cut. On location, that there was simmering animosity between them. Cooper, enduring suffering and bearing the burden of the whole movie, didn't want diversions. However, Elam was the type of somebody who flourished in disorder. The filmmaker, the two were kept apart by Fred Zinnemann Ace as much as feasible. They shared very little, sequences, but the icy quiet off camera was louder than any pre-written words. What made it worse? Not only was High Noon a film, Cooper's personal arc of redemption. He required the Oscar, and he understood. His performance was tragic, nuanced, and brimming with fear. He was the man who was left behind by his town, alone with death. The Academy presented the golden statue to him, but Cooper wasn't present to acknowledge it. He was in Europe. Thus, John Wayne, the individual who'd tested the politics of the movie and stepped on stage for him to accept it. That instant encapsulated everything: conflict, ego, and politics whirling beneath a glossy Hollywood surface. As Cooper earning honors abroad, Elam rode the momentum into a new stage of his professional life. He had no desire to be heroic. He didn't require prime billing. All he wanted were roles, and doors began to open because of High Noon opening. This leads us to 1954. Vera Cruz. Jack Elam was more than just a figure in the background that is hazy. He was rough, noisy, and lethal text. The film, a violent, chaotic story about 3 million is being pursued by American mercenaries in imperial gold across the Franco Empire, the Mexican War. It was fired completely. In Mexico, has a substantial $1.6 million budget and would eventually make over $1 million at the box office. And you know what? Who is back at the top of the cast? Gary Cooper. This time, though, he wasn't the one star. Burt was standing next to him. Lancaster, young, bulky, noisy, and assured. A man who produces his own business. A man who served as the film's co-producer and who didn't hesitate to confront Cooper, scene by scene. Cooper was acquainted with Vera. Cruz wasn't your typical Western. It was shady, immoral, treacherous, and backstabbing. He was worried about the script. He desired his persona revised to be less ambiguous in terms of morality, more valiant. Lancaster disagreed. The pair off-camera clash, but Lancaster had power right now. He represented the future. Cooper was the past. Additionally, in the midst of this, Jack was moving the battlefield once more. Elam. By now, Elam had been employed his path to Hollywood's most prestigious typecast. He was the preferred antagonist. You brought in this guy when you needed that hero to confront actual danger. Elam didn't give a damn if he had 20 lines or just one. He made every moment matter. His crooked eye, his fidgety hands, his uncanny serenity. It all contributed to his notoriety. This, however, Elam wasn't merely sharing at the moment. Cooper in a film. He observed him fade. Cooper continued to play the role, but he was exhausted behind the scenes. The heat from Mexico didn't help. The production filmed in Cuernavaca on location and at Teotihuacan was a taxing place. Tensions flared. Lancaster desired greater authority. Cooper desired that the movie adhere to custom. Elam also observed it, silently unfold, watching both Titans' learning skills and taking notes in my head. But don't be misled, Cooper saw the presence of Elam. He found it bothersome, not because to Elam's disrespect, but since he was genuine. The sector was moving in the direction of actors like Jack, rough, genuine, and unpolished. Cooper comes from a mythical and Polish realm. Elam was blind and from a cotton field. Eyes. One cowboy made millions. Hats. The other struggled into the frame with a director's face could hardly take their eyes off of. Additionally, as the in Vera, two did not exchange lines immediately. Cruz, you could feel the energy between them. Elam stood for the novel type of Western, messy, aggressive, and erratic. Cooper stood for the traditional, idealistic, honorable, well-organized, and inwardly, Cooper could sense the change. He wasn't merely fighting aging. He was fighting the future, and the future appeared to be somewhat similar to Elam Jack. After the movie ended, detractors emphasized the generational conflict between Lancaster and Cooper. However, insiders in the industry recalled something different. That smile on Elam's face throughout his scenes. That cold he brought without a word to the screen. And how Cooper, despite all of his praise, stayed away from him behind the camera. 2 movies, 2 crashes, and 2 extremely distinct legacies. What happened next wasn't limited to scripts and roles. It was about who made it through the subsequent wave of the calm tension in Hollywood between Jack Elam and Gary Cooper would reverberate even after the cameras have stopped rolling. Due to the fact that following High Noon, and according to Vera Cruz, the power dynamics had both males were aware of the shift. Gary Cooper sensed it immediately in his literally bones. Midway through the 1950s, he was in agony all the time. While filming of exploding pieces of wild metal from a well of dynamited oil ripped through his Vera Cruz, he slipped off a horse and hurt his hip again. Then arrived the incident with the rifle. Burt Lancaster was let go. The blast burnt because it was too close. Cooper's chest. There was only one mishap, one after the other. Behind the calm, cool hero was a man who had been sewn together by quiet and procedures. Nevertheless, he continued to appearing. He still held important titles within him. Billy's court-martial Mitchell, man and friendly persuasion in the West were all burdened by Cooper's legacy, yet a change occurred in voice. His characters grew older, more nuanced and replete with sorrow. He not only the valiant marshal or the no longer a noble soldier, he was the elderly outsider, the man who was having trouble maintaining his clean name in a world that was changing without him. His condition continued to deteriorate. He suffered from hernias and ulcers and endured many operations. He established in 1959 his own production business and assumed 3 roles with a redemptive theme. Each and every, the movie seemed like an admission. He portrays a haunting doctor in Hanging Tree by guilt and authority. They arrived at a disgraced officer named Cordura is attempting to respect others and bear his own shame. Additionally, in the Mary's Wreck, he puts everything on the line to demonstrate that he wasn't the antagonist they said he was. As Cooper struggled with suffering and legacy, Jack Elam was turning into invincible. At last, Hollywood had decided how to handle him. If you required a villain with a skewed perception, and Elam was your man, with a snarky smile. By the end of the 1950s, viewers became aware of anticipate his arrival. Anarchy, hep-laid lowlifes, outlaws, and gangsters. Lives, frequently in, only a few lines but constantly with a vitality that is unforgettable. TV more adored him than the movie. In between, he appeared on every show during the 1950s and 1960s. Gunsmoke, the Big Western series, The Have Gun, Cheyenne, Rifleman, and Bonanza Zorro, Will Travel. He even starred as an insane bus rider in The Legendary Criminal and The Twilight Zone days in Death Valley. In A Sea of Squarejack, one of the jawed heroes was the face that made you uneasy. Then there was unexpected turn of events. Elam received a shot in 1963 at portraying a decent man, a changed US Marshal after gunfighter in the Dakotas. Although it only had 19 episodes, something had changed. The directors began observing his humorous side. He joked on the night of the grizzly rather than skulls. West, by the way, he was the humorous pastor. Then, a small Once Upon a Time in the West scenario. A pistol barrel, a fly, and Elam. He doesn't speak, but takes the scene. And he pauses at that point, being only a bad guy. He broke in 1969 permanently out of the bad guy box. Encouragement. Your neighborhood sheriff and back your local gunfighter's visage was flipped, inverted. Now he was the comedian. The lovable mess. Relief. Partnered with Burt Garner and James Garner, Elam Kennedy was Hollywood's preferred sidekick. In the ensuing 10 years, he was cast 15 more times by Kennedy. And when Cooper was entering his last, Elam was performing in sitcoms. He plays a grumpy role in Texas Wheeler's Dad. He appears in Home Improvement. Ernest Borgnine by his side. Even in how he's still playing Cannonball Run, the insane proctologist on the other side of Dean Martin, with Sammy Davis Jr., you were unable to maintain him from the screen. Not bad for a man who once had trouble keeping his eyes straight. Time to return to Cooper's universe was about to expire. He underwent surgery in 1960 for advanced prostate cancer. A second, in 1961, surgery was performed, but it was too late. In a few weeks, on May 13, 1961, upon discovering that the cancer had spread, Cooper died gently at the age of 60. James Stewart agreed to his last honorary Oscar. The president gave a call. Prayers were sent by the Pope. Cooper's final the public's words were full of grace. "I'm not afraid," he said. The burial attracted everyone. Hepburn, John Sinatra, and Fred Astaire, Wayne, and even Marlene Dietrich. That day, Hollywood came to a halt after Cooper was laid to rest in Culver City, relocated to New York years later. His legacy, a unique kind of movie star, over $200 million at the box office, 3 Oscars office, and a standing established by being honorable, calm, and incredibly human. However, Elam's tale was far from over. Following Cooper's death, Elam continued to work. In 1986, he appeared in the film The Aurora Encounter, in which he developed a bond with a boy who was 11. Experiencing progeria, that friendship turned into the documentary Tomb Not a Freak. Jack didn't say much regarding his own suffering, but Mickey Hayes received to him. They maintained communication until Mickey died. In the same year, Elam played a broke uncle on Easy Street, attempting to provide for his niece. He partnered with Willie Nelson in 1988 for a crazy Western television film. The roles were diminished, but his vitality remained the same. Eventually, in 1994, Hollywood expressed what fans already knew. Jack Elam was legendary. He was admitted into the Hall of Great Western Artists in Oklahoma City. His final years were silent, devoid of scandals or headlines. He passed away in 2003 at home in Ashland, Oregon. He was 82. The once frightened man viewers as the most despised antagonist gained popularity as one of the most adored characters actors of his era. 2 lifetimes, 2 routes. The regulations were made by one, and the other broke them. According to Gary Cooper, a hero-like appearance. Jack Elam demonstrated what it means to be remembered without making an effort. Additionally, in those instances in which their worlds clashed on-positioned across the lens in stillness, Hollywood experienced a unique emotion. Due to when a myth begins to fade and a misfit starts to emerge, but the narrative doesn't simply transform it into something you never forget.